I'm not sure if you noticed, but the three readings today all carry with them the same permeating theme. That 27th chapter of Sirach, the first reading, the 14th chapter of Romans, the second reading, and coming from the 18th chapter of Matthew, the third reading of the gospel. Each one of those readings contains a theme that permeates all three of those readings. Does anyone know what that permeating theme happens to be? Exactly right. It's the theme of forgiveness. That Jesus is telling us how important it is to forgive. And he's going to tell us in the reading from Matthew, which is coming out of the 18th chapter of Matthew, just how often we must forgive. Because there is a limit, as Jesus is going to tell us, in how we are to forgive. Let's take a look at verse 21, 22, 18th chapter of Matthew. Now we're going to take this little verse in sections. So it starts off by saying, Peter approached Jesus and asked him, Lord, if my brother sins against me, how often must I forgive him? We're going to stop right there. Now, Peter is the rock in which Jesus is building his church. Now, Peter is smart enough to realize this. When someone hurts me as my brother, he realizes that I'm going to need to forgive him. So that had to make Jesus feel pretty good because he's saying, Peter, I'm putting all my chips on you, and I'm glad that you realize that you should always forgive. Now, Peter does something that a lot of people do. A lot of people not only will ask the question, but they also then give an answer to the very question they ask. And Peter does the same thing here. Let's take a look at what he does. We'll start again from the beginning and move down a little bit further this time. Peter approached Jesus and asked him, Lord, if my brother sins against me, how often must I forgive him? And then he answers his own question, as many as 7 times. Now, Peter at that point does that because he believes he's going to receive commendation from Jesus. He got this feeling Jesus is going to say to Peter, I'm so proud of you, Peter. You know, most people only forgive 3 times. Look, I'll forgive you the first time. I'll forgive you the second time. I'll forgive you a 3rd time. But that's it. Peter, I'm so proud of you that you went with this generous number, going twice what most people forgive, and you're adding 1 for good measure, 7 times, Peter. You are really something. I'm so proud that you're the rock on which I'm going to build my church. That's what Peter is expecting when he comes up with that number. How often shall I forgive my brother? Jesus, 7 times? Well, he doesn't receive commendation. He doesn't receive condemnation, but Jesus is going to let Peter know how often you must forgive. And we'll pick up at the very end part. Jesus answered, I say to you, not 7 times, but 77 times. Now, that doesn't mean that you got to get an abacus and keep track of every time you forgive your brother. Then on the 78th time, that's when you no longer have to forgive. That's it. I got the 78. I did 77, just like Jesus suggests. What Jesus is saying by the reference, not 7 times, but 77 times, he's using that as an unlimited number. You must always forgive. That's where the onus of being a Christian comes into play, because it is a challenge to forgive. And forgiving comes in gradations. It is easy to forgive someone if they pull out in front of you, you didn't get hurt, they didn't get hurt, your cars didn't bump. It is more difficult to forgive someone if they have violated you in a way that forgiving them is so difficult. It's easier to forgive someone who hurts you than it is to forgive someone who hurts someone you love. That usually we can't forgive. When someone hurts someone we love, the person we love will find it easier to forgive that person than we will find it to forgive that person, because when someone hurts someone we love, that's crossing a threshold that sometimes you say to yourself, I can't forgive. But Jesus is saying what? The ultimate role and job of a Christian is to forgive 77 times, which means always. I was at a border bookstore in Monroeville, a nice little bookstore down there. And I was in border bookstore, and I'm over where they have the magazines, and I'm looking at all the magazines. They kind of have them up on a shelf, not on a flat shelf, but an upright shelf. I'm looking at various magazines, and I'm reading the cover of the magazine, trying to read what articles are inside of the magazine. Usually, sometimes the most enticing article inside of that magazine is in bold print on the cover itself. So I'm looking at all those magazines, and I run across this one magazine, and the article that you would find inside of the magazine, it said this: the most unhappiest person in the world identified. Oh, that struck a chord with me. The most unhappiest person in the world identified. I thought to myself, I got to get that magazine. I got to read that article. There's 6 billion people in the world. What research they must have done. They have identified the most unhappiest person in the world. No one asked me anything when they were doing a survey. How did they figure out who that person is? So I took the magazine off the shelf. I'm on the way to the checkout counter. And then I noticed something. I noticed all these people sitting on tables in Borders bookstore, drinking coffee, having some kind of drink with a little Danish, reading a magazine or reading a book. That's interesting. Why would a bookstore allow a person to have coffee, drink Danish, and read the book there? Then I noticed something even more interesting. I noticed a few people, when they were done with the coffee and their Danish, they disposed of the cup and threw out the napkin, and then they took the book they were reading or magazine they were reading, and they put it back. I thought to myself, how long can this store stay in business? They put the book back. So I look at the magazine, $5. I thought to myself, $5? Why spend $5 on a magazine? I'll use the $5 towards coffee and Danish and read the book here. And then I'll put it back and I'll leave. So I got the magazine, I picked up some coffee in Danish. Actually, it was only about $4.39. It had some change left. And I sat down on the table to read this article. Page 112. The most unhappiest person in the world identified. So open up to page 112, and I'm going to read this article. This was some time ago. But I memorized the entire article. I put it to memory. So I'm going to try to share with you that which I read from memory. It's a couple years ago now. The title of the magazine article was this: the most unhappiest person in the world identified. And from memorization, I read the article, and the article went as follows. A person walked up to someone one day and they said to that person, "Forgive." That person said, "Never." That was the end of the article. I memorized it. I remembered all that from years ago. I memorized the whole page. I was really happy I didn't spend $5 in that magazine. But that's powerful. And that's all the article had written on it. The whole page was just that simple. But I thought to myself, that speaks volumes. The most unhappiest person in the world identified. And the person was asked to forgive. And they responded, "Never." That makes them the most unhappiest person in the world. And that is true. When you cannot forgive for whatever it is, it eats you alive. It's a carcinogenic. It tears at you, it tears you apart, it rips you apart. It will rip your family apart if you allow it to metastasize into those close to you. If you cannot, will not, decide not to forgive. Turns out to be, as they always said, forgiveness is a gift that you give to yourself. To allow yourself to be liberated from the hurt of life. Liberated from the hurt that someone else caused a family member. Liberated from the hurt when someone has destroyed a family member of yours. Has ripped your heart out of your body. Destroyed your world. And you say to yourself, what do I do from this day forward? How do I find peace? There's only one way you can. You have to find the ability. Obviously, it's not easy. But you got to pull in deep to find the ability to forgive. That magazine article was right. It was one of the shortest magazine articles that I ever read in my life. It was well worth the $5 that magazine cost had I purchased it. But instead I had coffee in Danish. But the article said this: the most unhappiest person in the world identified. When the person was asked to forgive, they responded, never.